Good morning, everyone. I'm Julia, and my topic is the investigation of perfectionism and the intrinsic-extrinsic motivation for vocational high school students. And in my slide, there include three parts: introduction, literature review, and methodology. First, introduction. Let's talk about the background. We know that perfectionism is one of the personal traits, and it has been linked to both maladaptive traits and negative outcome in many studies, such as Burns in 1980s and Patch in 1984. However, Adler in 1956 argued that it is perfectionism is a normal and innate ability to seek perfect, and it is a mental drive. And people who try to seek the perfect due to the sense of inferior for human being, and thus they try to assess the self-achievement by achieving superiority. And follow comes the statement of the problem. Although there are many studies about perfectionism, however, that was explored in the United States, and seldom a few of studies invested in Taiwan. And in Taiwan, although there are some researches about perfectionism, however, those participants were kindergarten, junior high school students, gifted kids, or university school students. Yeah, and also those studies just focus on the relationship between perfectionism and learning achievement, or depression, or mental health, and so on. Therefore, the purpose of this study is to find out the actual phenomena, whether perfectionism is related to intrinsic and extrinsic motivation for vocational high school students in Taiwan, and try to probe whether extrinsic motivation can be switched to intrinsic motivation due to perfectionism. And here comes some two research questions. First one: what is the relationship between perfectionism and the intrinsic-extrinsic motivation for vocational high school students? And second, to what extent that extrinsic motivation can be internalized into intrinsic motivation due to perfectionism? However, there are some limitations. First, this study cannot be inferred to all the vocational high school students, because this study just investigates one school in Nantou. And second, there are not too much variables in this study. Therefore, for further study, further researchers can add some influence factors for their studies. And then literature review. First, let's talk about perfectionism. According to Hemechik in 1978's model of continuum of moral and neurotic perfectionism, he considered that the normal one is the drive to drive a sense of pressure from their efforts to achieve, while maintaining free to be less than perfect as situation permits. While Hewitt and Flat, they consider that self-oriented perfectionism can become neurotic when it interacts with stress or perceived failure, or when in combination with high socially prescriptive perfectionism. And according to Hewitt and Flat in 1991, they proposed three dimensions of perfectionism. First, self-oriented, that is a person who set high standards and try to meet the standards for himself or herself. Second is social-oriented perfectionism. And those kind of person just they try to meet the standards in order to please others. And the third one is other-oriented perfectionism. They are the people who try to impose standards on others, ask others to meet the high standards. Yeah. And as I say that perfectionism can be divided into 3 parts. And actually, one person is hardly to complete become self-oriented or social-oriented or other-oriented perfectionism. Sometimes it combined together. Yeah, and in this study, I try to follow the Jennifer Mills and the Kurt Blaine-Stans, their study. We try to exclusive the self-oriented and other-oriented when we try to investigate the social-oriented one. Yeah. And for intrinsic motivation, we know that motivational aspects of perfectionism may be responsible for the adaptive behaviors associated with self-oriented perfectionism. For example, self-oriented perfectionism, they not only just try to set the standard for them, but the motivational components of the need to meet the standards is due to part